Hello everyone, this is Christy from MyScrapbookEvolution.com, and today I'm working with sketch number 435 from Scrapbook Challenges. It's a really cute sketch. It calls for 4 photos and they're arranged in a band, sort of on a diagonal, with strips of pattern paper. So this is really going to be a great sketch for those of you who have leftover strips of paper that you want to use up, or even to use some strips of washi tape. Now the problem I kept running into was one that I figured others might be having as well. When I take my photos, I don't always take them with a specific size in mind. So finding a photo that would work, or actually a series of photos that would work with a 3x3 size, just wasn't happening very easily for me. And there are times when I see photos that I really just want to work with, and this was the case here. I had a series of 4 photos and they're of my son on an Easter egg hunt in the park. They're really what I want to use, so what I need to do is to adjust the sketch to fit the photos. Now you can do the same thing at home with a ruler, following the method that I'm going to show you here, with any size photo that you like, as long as that it will fit relatively on a 12x12 canvas. So the first thing I did was to print all 4 photos out in a collage form. They were printed to 3.5 by 5 inches in size, and then I chose to start with the photo that had the largest image of my son in it. I don't want to lose any of him, crop any parts of him out when I cut the photo down. So that's why I chose the photo with the largest image of him. And I ended up being able to crop it down to 2.5 inches by about 3.5 inches. This gave me the measurements for which to crop the other 3 photos. And that's what I did here. Now you could probably crop a little more off of these. You're seeing some extra space from the grass and the greenery here. But to work with this sketch, it's probably easiest to keep them all the same size. So that's what I did. They're all about that 2.5 by 3.5 inch size. I went ahead and I matted them on white cardstock. Even though I'm going to be using more white cardstock underneath them, it still gives a very slight tone-on-tone delineation. Just makes the photos a little more visible. Now you're going to lay them out in the stair step or diagonal pattern just as it is in the sketch. And you want to try to play a little bit with the way that you're going to space them. So it ends up that the best spacing for me, the way that where I like the gap in between, is to have them about 1.5 inches down from one another. So place one, go down 1.5 inches, place the next, go down another 1.5 inches, place your third photo, and the same with the last. The only issue you are now going to have, because you are using a smaller size than the 3x3 photo, is that you're going to have a gap on this side of the 12x12 canvas. There are 2 things you could do in this instance. One, you could add a piece of pattern paper here in a block to the design. You could add a piece of washi tape. You could add a row of embellishments to fill it, or possibly some journaling. I'm going to do something different from that. I'm going to crop down this 12x12 canvas, and then I'm going to mount it on another piece of colored cardstock. So that's going to be my next step. I'm going to go do that now, and then I'm going to come back and show you the next stage of the layout. Okay, so I've just finished cutting off the portions of the white cardstock that I don't want to use. And now I'm going to add the strips of paper across here as it was called for in the sketch. To save a little bit of time, I went ahead and I cut my paper strips. I've also inked the edges. And if you can see a little bit better, I've gone ahead and stitched around the borders. You don't have to do either of those things if you don't want to. I just felt it would give a little bit of extra detail to the page. So what I did to determine the size of the strip that I was going to need to cut was to simply use my ruler and measure from the top of the photo to the top of this photo here. And when I do that, it's about 1.5 inches, maybe a little bit more. So I cut strips at about 1.5 inches, and I can then simply just add them where I want them to go. Now, if say you cut them a little bit too big or a little bit too small, all you need to do is adjust the placement of the photos with the strips so that you get the size of the gap between the photo and the pattern paper that you want to show. So it's really easy to fix if you cut something wrong. There's no reason to then have to go back and recut a whole bunch more. I'll simply put these down, make sure they're where I want them to be. And now that I have everything in place, I can glue it down to the page. I do want to add a little bit more pizzazz to the page itself. A lot of you know that I love to add dimension to my layouts using chipboard. So what I'm going to do is pop a few of these items up. You can do the same things at home with a sheet of chipboard. You can also use pop dots if that's something you want to go with. I find that chipboard is a little sturdier than pop dots are, and it kind of depends on the pop dots brand. So I chose just one photo that I'm going to kind of pop up a little bit here. I'm going to take into account my measurement and try to keep everything pretty even, just the way I had it before. And that's just going to slightly emphasize this photo just a little bit more. Very subtle, but that's the way I kind of like to do things. I like to add dimension. And this particular design is dynamic, but it can feel very flat. So if you're not used to scrapbooking flat, popping a few items up dimensionally, either in the title or maybe the picture you want to focus on, can add back that dimension you're used to. So once I get everything glued down and into place, I'm just going to trim the edges off. You'll notice that I chose 3 different types of pattern here. I have essentially an organic print with the flowers. I have a dot print. In this case, the dots are actually diamond shape, and I have a stripe. And I'm keeping sort of a spring feel to the page with the colors. It's not necessarily an Easter themed pattern paper collection. This is actually paper from my March Cocoa Daisy kit. Let's see, I'm not liking this gap right here, so let's just make a few adjustments. There we go. Okay, so once you get everything down the way that you like it, it was just lifting up a little bit, so I added a little more adhesive. We're just going to trim off these edges very carefully. And then we can add our title and any embellishments that we choose. You can also choose how you want to place this particular square on the canvas. You can go up into a corner, you can go in the center, you can go off to one side. It's totally up to you. I kind of want it to feel framed, and I could, if I wanted to, also ink the edges or mat it onto another piece of colored cardstock, just to try to give it more of a layered effect and keep that framed look. In fact, I think I'm going to do just that. I think I'm going to go over into my supplies and look for a very pale pink to mat this onto. I'll be right back. Okay, so I found this very pale pink cardstock. It sort of matches the pink in the diamonds. And I mounted the square grid with the white cardstock on top of it. And I did so off center, sort of to the upper right on the cardstock. So you'll notice that the pink border goes around these three edges, but not here. I'm pushing that up against the edge here. I kind of like that placement rather than square in the middle of the page. So it's still framed for me, but it also has a more dynamic feel. It's not as structured, I guess you'd say. So now it's time to play around with the title. I know that I want to say Egg Hunt at the Park, and I've chosen a couple of different letters to work with. I've got these glitter stickers. I have these chipboard pink letters from Bella Boulevard, and I have more thickers, Amy Tangerine thickers, in fact, in a craft color. So let's start out with the first portion of it. Now, because this is a script and I know the letter G is going to hang off, I'm going to start working with the larger chipboard letters here with Egg Hunt. I want to try to find a way to overlap those thickers with these chipboard letters. I'm also noticing that these are not popping out in quite the way that I would hope for them to. So what I'm going to do is to take a pink marker. I've got my picked raspberry distress marker here. I'm going to take the brush side and I'm just going to run it along the edges. This is very similar to inking the edges. The problem that I have sometimes when I'm inking the edges of things are getting, obviously it'd be hard to get even a small cat's eye pad, ink pad, into that section there. So this is where a brush marker comes in handy. It just takes a quick second to do that. You also get a little more control than you would if you were using an ink pad on the letters. If you do this and you find that it's still not dark enough, that you're still not seeing enough of a delineation between the chipboard letter and the pattern paper or cardstock below it, try to choose a marker in a darker color and just go over it again. So you want to start with your lightest color choice first and then work darker. Unless, of course, you just want to start right away with a black or a dark brown. It's going to depend on the color palette that you're working with while you're scrapbooking. Okay, so almost there. One more letter to go. And I don't know if it's apparent to you, but from where I'm sitting, I can see these a little bit better against that pattern paper background. Maybe it's in my imagination, I don't know. I just love to outline my letters. One of my quirks. So now that these are here, I've got them positioned the way that I want them to be. I'm going to try to play around with layering the word egg over the top. The E obviously is not going to hang down, so we're going to place it about here. I'm not going to press it down all the way because I want to work with the placement of the G's. Here we go. Just lightly there, and I don't know if you can see, it's kind of curled up because again, I want to make sure I have it placed just the way I want it. And I haven't yet stuck these chipboard letters down. So now I can kind of move this around a little bit. I ended up going more towards the left here with this because I didn't want this letter E too close to the edge here. I didn't want it to be kind of cut off. So I like the way this is looking. And now I just need to stick these letters down and I can push these down. I'm not worried about anything overlapping in the title down here. And if you recall from the sketch, it kind of has a long title that flows through these 3 strips of paper. So this will work out perfectly. I'm just going to peel the backing off of these and discard them. Although, quick trick here, these are kind of shiny and glossy and you've got a letter. So if you have a dark colored cardstock, I don't know if you can see this here, you can use glossy accents to stick these down and you've got kind of a waxy letter. So sometimes it's cool to save these little bits from your chipboard letters. Okay, I'm just going to press these down. First pressing the chipboard down before I press down the glitter foam alpha. Of course, sometimes these don't cooperate the way I hope they do. Those backs love to stay stuck. Okay. Now I could have done the title all in the same color, but I didn't think that would be as much fun. This particular design doesn't call for a ton of embellishing. So playing around with the color of the letters in the titles is a fun way to sort of add a little bit of variety to your page and a little bit of color. So now that these chipboard letters are down, I'm just going to gently press down the foam thickers. So I have Egg Hunt, and now it's time to open up my craft. And I'm going to use the @ symbol, at the park. Now you can get kind of fun with the thickers too. Here I'm kind of altering them up and down just a bit. Kind of a fun font already in the first place, and it's very tall and thin, so altering the way that I'm placing them, you know, this is a little higher than the H and the E is a little higher, just kind of going up and down a bit makes it a little more interesting to me. Alright, so we've got at the park. And now I need to figure out how exactly I want to embellish this. I've pulled out a pile of supplies that I think I might want to use. I'm not 100% sure. I also started this die cut. I had this scrap of paper left over. I believe this is Amy Tangerine. And I had this die cut egg left over from another project. So I glued down the egg and I added some jewels to it and I let that dry. I did that first while I was working on the page. So I'm just going to cut this out and see where it might work on my layout. I also wanted to use a bunny. I'm looking to use a few motifs that remind you of Easter because there's nothing in particular in regards to these particular pattern papers that point to the fact that this is an Easter layout. You can obviously tell by what my son is doing in the photo, but I still wanted just a little bit of something festive for the Easter holiday. So I've got this egg, and I'm also kind of eyeing the bunny stamp here. And I'm not sure where I want to put him. perhaps there's a way to stamp him and make it look as though he's got the egg leaning into his hand. I'll just kind of have to play with that a bit. Let me go pull a few more embellishments and then I'll come back and finish it off and I'll show you my final process with this. So I just stamped the bunny. I used the marker, same pink that I used before, the pickled raspberry distress marker. Added just a little bit of pink to the inner ear of the bunny. And I don't think you're going to be able to see it, but I added a little bit of shimmer to him. I love these watercolors, so I used one of the white and I just went lightly over the bunny and let it dry a bit. So now I'm just finishing cutting him out. When you are cutting out a stamped image, it does not have to be perfect. It's okay if there's a little bit of a white border showing. There we go, and I just have his tiny little feet. There we go. So now I just need to find out where I want to place him. I could do something like this. And actually that kind of works well for me. I could place him like this in the title. That also works pretty well. A couple different places that I can put him. Just making it look like that egg is leaning and he's holding on to it. I also have a couple of dimensional items like this flare badge, and I'm just not quite sure, kind of struggling with the fact that the layout is so flat. It's not what I usually like to do. Got a few of these buttons here as well, and I'm just kind of playing around with how I might like to use them. I'm just trying to move these around. I've got different tabs here, trying to figure out what might be the best option for this particular page. Really, I guess it doesn't need a whole lot of extra dimension. It's just a personal preference whether you want to add it or not. I've got a bunch of different puppy stickers and things like that, and I can't quite place what I want to put on it. Played around with the idea of some of these tags. Really, this layout doesn't need a whole lot, and the journaling is going to go here on strips. That's what it calls for in the sketch. So I guess I'm just going to end up leaving it kind of simple and not embellishing a ton. I do want to see if I can add just a little something with these. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the journaling here, and then I'm going to put 3 of the white wood veneer buttons. These are from Pink Fresh Studios from their monthly kit club, and I'm going to put a few white buttons up here at the top, and that'll just kind of pull everything in. I'm going to share a photo of the layout at the end of this video, but you'll also be able to see it at myscrapbookevolution.com. You'll also want to be sure to head over to Scrapbook Challenges throughout the month of April. You can play with any of the challenges there, including this sketch, for a chance to win a prize. And there's more details on the Scrapbook Challenges website.